If you guys live in an area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming us on, give us a like and share that audio or video. Also, if you want to join in on the conversation, you can send us a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. And notice I said you can send a chat because my channel has been reactivated. I got an email or text message on my Twitter account. And YouTube basically said, hey, we looked at this case again. And after looking at this case again, we came to a different conclusion and we were too strong on getting rid of your channel. No, seriously, that's what they said. Right here, the exact quote on this was, following up on this, the team found that your YPP suspension was an over-enforcement of our policies. You should see that your channel has been reinstated. We're sorry for the frustration this caused. Thank you for bearing with us while we sort this out. Now, this is not going to be my main headline, but I do want to point that out. Those things have consequences. When I used to have my channel prior, and the channel was the only thing I did, they shut my channel down. Now, the question becomes, how do the person eat? How did the person get the revenue that YouTube is basically holding on to? What is the way that you guys have determined to shut this channel down? Because oftentimes there's no transparency in that particular choice. And it seems that those choices on some level run within the context of the politics of whoever is looking at the channel. So yes, there's a question of this notion of platform versus publication. And in this very specific instance, YouTube has been acting like a publication. If they can come back to my page and they can say, hey, by the way, we think you are living up to the guidelines, we're sorry, then you have to ask the question of why. Why did you do that? Is it over-enforcement? And how many people have you been, quote unquote, over-enforcing? And why are you over-enforcing? I hope you understand what I mean. If you have any discretion in that, then you have discretion. And that means you're acting as a publisher. Section 230 in this situation does not apply. I hope you understand what I mean. If you're going to do that, you have to explain why. And the idea of getting rid of a person's revenue on that particular channel, meaning the job that they were doing, should have some kind of contractual obligations where you can't necessarily just destroy the individual's wealth like that. It's a big deal. Yes, I have a secondary position, but there are a lot of people who do this job just as the job in and of itself. Secular Talk. When the first apocalypse happened, the YouTube apocalypse, Secular Talk, Cal has, I don't know, he has been doing this for like 4 or 5 years. They eliminated 99% of his revenue. The reason is because secular came across as a religion and they didn't want to back up religious content. So a channel that was basically on progressive politics gets shut down for being uber religious. Utterly ridiculous. I don't have an issue if there's violent content. I don't have the issue of somebody saying, hey, go kill this guy. That doesn't necessarily bother me, right? Because that does fall under the auspices of 230, where you're using that as somewhat of a sword to get rid of that stuff. But that has limits. If I open a store, meaning just because they're private property doesn't necessarily mean that there are no limits. If I open a store right over here, I would have to pay a certain amount for minimum wage. I would have to have handicap access for people to get into the store. I can't say I'm not going to serve blacks, I'm not going to serve gays, I'm not going to serve whatever. I can't do that. If you open a business, you've opened a business, and there's certain things and rules you have to live by with that business. That doesn't change because you're online. That does not change because it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Those things, just like the stores out there, they're private companies, yes. But just like the stores out there, they also need to have rules to go by in regards to who and when you can get rid of people. And it should be formal, it should be clear, and it should be transparent. And it's none of those things right now. If laws need to be passed to do that, then laws need to be passed to do that. The problem here is we've allowed these companies to be our commons. It's the thing to which we talk. And I have to be honest, I don't even know or believe entirely that putting this as, let's say, a utility would make it even better. I'm not even sure. Because you could end up in a situation where the government just doesn't like what people are saying and screw with the regulations every bit as much as Twitter and Facebook is. I'm not entirely sure what the answer to this is, but I know the answer is not the way YouTube and Facebook and Twitter have been going. There should be clear and transparent rules that need to get very clear about Section 230 and what it means to be part of Section 230, especially for internet companies. And those internet companies, especially if we as a collective in the society are going to say, these things are our commons. These are the things to which we use to communicate with one another. These are the things that we use to put our ideals out there. If that's what we're going to do as a society, then that should be defended. Period. Removing the income from an individual from a channel because you don't necessarily like the political content that the person is making, despite the fact that the content is actually right, all of it, researched, all of it, given in a way that you can understand my thinking on it. And yeah, we might have fights with people who are talking about vaccines and everything else, but that's not me, nor is that the thrust of this particular channel. It is offensive, massively so, to put out defaming me and my channel, saying the content is harmful. Yeah, that's a big deal to me. It's a big deal to me when I see some of the other people get taken off, and I'm like, wow, those people are nuts. And they've included me into the people who are nuts category. Yeah, that bothers me, especially when my channel is not like that. It seems, honestly, that a choice was made by whoever was looking and making those choices. And that if there was leeway in that, discretion in that, then you have a problem. If you could say that my content is violent, fair enough, but you should be able to show it. If you say it's harmful, fair enough, but you should be able to show it. You should be able to show me the videos. You should be able to point to it. You should be able to say, here, this, right there. That breaks our guideline. Because otherwise, how would you know? Somebody had to go through, somebody had to make a determination, somebody had to look, somebody had to write something down saying, I don't particularly like this. So why can't you show it? Why can't you show it? You can't show it because the moment that you put eyes on it, people realize that it is a political choice. Or at the very least, a discretionary choice. Discretionary choice. So no, you want to keep it opaque. You don't want it to be transparent. And you want to be able to provide these words of God's after the fact, meaning there's no way to beseech pretty much anybody. They can basically ignore you, steal your cash, and you can't do anything about it. This process really does need to change. And while the Republicans were full of it when they were screaming about, wanting to lie on online or whatever, my argument for this is not theirs, even though it probably does go in somewhat a similar direction. There needs to be clearly defined rules of the road if these systems are going to be our commons. Shane, what do you think, my man? This wasn't supposed to be my monologue. I wanted to talk about Donald Trump's impeachment, but it just kind of went this way. What do you think about this? I mean, I think they're acting like a publisher, honestly. And I'm not coming from this like the Ted Cruz nonsense. I'm just saying it seems like somebody made a choice. They were looking at my content and they made a choice, a discretionary choice, which is not something a platform should do. What are your thoughts?
I think you're right, and I think that part of what they're doing to give themselves cover is they're using this argument, a sort of flat argument. Just first of all, that's great to hear, and congratulations, and it's really really good to have you back over on YouTube. I mean, not that you were suppressed, but it's glad to have you back, able to do what you were doing, able to make money the way you were planning on making it, able to sort of keep that side career going, that kind of thing. You've been working on that for years. So it's just the fact that they were able to take that away with a snap of their fingers effectively is ridiculous. And it was completely ungrounded. And so it's good that they reversed that decision. And I was worried that they wouldn't, but thankfully they did. Coming back to the actual conversation here, what they're able to do is give themselves cover by claiming that content is dangerous, claiming which they have to remove. They would face repercussions, of course, if they were letting people post illegal content. So they're able to, I will admit, went from dangerous to illegal. I went from a sort of ambiguous and more ambiguous thing to a slightly less ambiguous thing, which is frankly what they're doing too. They're able to give themselves cover for suppressing content they don't like, or their backers don't like, or outside parties don't like, by calling it dangerous. And they're able to sort of use this broad definition, this undefined sort of ambiguous rubric. They're able to use that in order to suppress content and in order to act as a publisher. I might be focusing on this a little bit too much, but when it comes to Section 230, that's the crucial difference. they should not. There should be some legal framework set in place, introduced by Congress, in my opinion, to clarify Section 230 and to make it more tenable in an era where you have mass social media censorship and where you have mass tech censorship in general. Again, this is, well, first of all, actually, have you heard from other folks who got demonetized on whether or not they were able to come back, Jamarl?
No, not yet.
You got to close.
Opportunity to hit anyone yet.
Because I hope they were. This happened all at once, which is why it's so weird. I mean, we were talking about this off the air. I don't know if it's somebody who went through and like flagged a whole bunch of videos outside of YouTube and then YouTube responded to them, or whether YouTube's algorithm tripped to switch somewhere and decided to just pull the plug, cut you guys all off. But it's ridiculous. They shouldn't have these powers, and we should have some means to keep them from doing this in the future. I don't know how else to say it. Only thing I'm worried about, and then I'll hand it back to you to close, is that if we give the government those powers, the government that we have and the government that we will have and the governments that we will have in the future would choose to use the exact same powers that YouTube is using against the exact same people in order to suppress alternative journalism and free speech. But what's your take on that one, Jamarl?
They'd do it in a heartbeat. They would do it in a heartbeat. Think of Trump for the moment. When Trump didn't like the information that was coming out of the Center for Disease Control, what did he do? He tried to get the information sent to the White House first. They wanted to scrub that data, meaning they didn't want the public to get access to the actual real information. I think the same thing would happen with us. I think you might have a situation, especially if there wasn't laws around it. Like if you create something like a free speech thing, then that's at the very least an offense against government intrusion, as opposed to the argument that consistently comes up, oh, they're a private company, they're a private company. Okay, well, maybe they shouldn't be a private company. Or at the very least, maybe it should be run almost like a utility. And under that, having rules of the road to go by. And that's the only thing I can think of as a way out. If there's no rules around it, then the companies can do whatever they want. So, yeah, Shane, I agree with you. I'm concerned either way, but I do think with at least government, there's a little bit more input from the standpoint of the public itself, and they are up to public scrutiny. Whereas, of course, the 1%, they basically draw a circle around themselves and say, stay out.
And we're going over slightly, and I'm going to close it out right after this because I know that you were going to anyway. But just real quick, yes, there would be more recourse with government, and frankly, that would mean that we wouldn't have to have these stupid conversations about whether or not tech companies, from a libertarian perspective, should be allowed to monitor and moderate their own platforms in the ways they see fit to do so. With the government, I would think that there would be a much stronger cause for response. You'd have much more, many more arrows in your quiver, legally and ethically, on a society-wide perspective, to speak back against governments suppressing free speech, particularly in America, the supposed bastion of free speech around the world. But we've got to go into a break. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back on the other side of this break in one short minute with our next guest, Steve Grumbine.